He didn't scream at first. He didn't punch a wall. He didn't call a security detail, or a lawyer, or even Meghan herself. When Prince Harry opened the DNA envelope, he simply whispered one shaky line no one in the palace had ever heard from him before. "This can't be real." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And that was the moment everything began to unravel. You ever witness a moment where a person's entire world collapses silently, like a building imploding from the inside? Not loud, not explosive, quiet, controlled, eerie, because the destruction is happening at a depth you can't see yet? That's exactly what palace staff described when they saw Harry pacing the private corridor at Frogmore Cottage, envelope in hand, eyes red, hands trembling, but face held completely still. Like he was trying to keep the storm inside his chest from exploding out in front of everyone. And here's the real question. What was inside that envelope that could crack a prince open from the inside? Tonight, we're going to walk through everything. The whispers, the timelines, the messages, the hidden past, the man Meghan never expected to resurface, and the child whose DNA set off the chain reaction that has now shocked the world. But let's start with this. What if the biggest secret in Meghan Markle's life wasn't the one the world has been debating for years? What if the real secret, the one that she allegedly buried long before her royal romance, is a love story she never intended to be exposed? And what if that love story produced a child, one Harry had no idea existed? Let me ask you something. If you discovered that someone you trusted more than anyone, someone you defended against the world, someone you built a new life with, had been hiding something this enormous, how would you react? Would you keep defending them? Would you walk away? Or would you demand answers no matter the cost? Because that's the crossroads Harry walked into the moment the DNA results flashed before him. Before that day, people close to him say Harry had been strangely tense for weeks. Unfocused, distracted, constantly on his phone, pacing during meetings, snapping at staff over minor things, and constantly checking the windows like he was expecting someone to show up unannounced. Some thought he was stressed about finances. Others thought he was tired of the constant scrutiny. But the truth? The truth wasn't on the surface. It was buried in the past. And that past didn't belong to him. It belonged to Meghan. But to understand why that moment hit Harry like a train, you need to understand the days leading up to it. Because things didn't fall apart all at once. The tension started slowly. A late-night phone call Meghan refused to explain, a message from an old acquaintance she brushed off, a random envelope addressed only to Harry with no return address. And then the arguments, the evasive answers, the sudden shift in Meghan's schedule, the story that kept changing. There's always a pattern before a disaster. Always. Harry felt something was off, but couldn't put his finger on it. Meghan became unusually defensive. Conversations turned vague. Meghan's expression changed whenever certain names were mentioned. You know how someone's eyes flicker for half a second when they're hiding something? Yeah, that. People who were with them say one night Meghan suddenly snapped, saying she was tired of being interrogated, tired of digging up old wounds, tired of Harry trying to control narratives. That outburst didn't come from nowhere. It came from fear. Fear that something buried was resurfacing. And it was. Because only a few hours later, Harry received a message that said, "Ask her about the child. The truth is long overdue." Imagine Harry reading that at 2 in the morning, sitting alone in a dim-lit kitchen, the refrigerator humming behind him, the rest of the house silent. At that moment, something in him broke, not violently, but quietly, like a thin thread snapping. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Harry knew Meghan had a life before him. He wasn't naive, but he didn't know everything. And it wasn't the past itself that shook him. It was the fact that someone out there claimed Meghan had hidden a secret so big, so explosive, that revealing it could shatter everything. This wasn't a rumor. It wasn't gossip. It wasn't another tabloid fantasy. This came from a source who knew things only someone close to Meghan's past would know. But here's the twist, the real twist, the one that makes this story more shocking than anything the public has heard so far. The DNA envelope wasn't originally meant for Harry. It was meant for someone else entirely. Someone from Meghan's past. Someone connected to her in a way Harry never expected. That's where the intensity of the situation began. That's where the questions started forming. Who was this man? How did he know Meghan? Why would he send DNA paperwork? Who was the child being tested? Why was Harry involved? And most importantly, why did Meghan panic the moment she found out Harry had seen the envelope? Because she did panic. People close to them confirmed it. Her face reportedly drained completely of color. Her hands shook. She begged Harry not to look inside. She said it wasn't what he thought. She said the person sending the test was dangerous. She said it was old history that meant nothing now. But that's not how someone reacts to something harmless, is it? Let me ask you this. If someone accused you of something outrageous and it wasn't true, would you panic? Or would you laugh, explain the misunderstanding, and move on? But Meghan didn't laugh. She froze. That's when Harry began to realize this wasn't just a rumor. Something deeper had been buried. Something huge. Something rooted in a part of Meghan's life she had never allowed him to see. That's when the fear kicked in. Not fear of Meghan. Fear of betrayal. He trusted her. He built his life around her. He sacrificed his family, his home, his identity for her. And suddenly, he found himself staring at an envelope that threatened to rewrite everything. And what did he do? He opened it. He had to. Because inside that envelope wasn't just DNA. It was a timeline. A name. A connection to someone Meghan once loved deeply. More deeply, perhaps, than she ever admitted. And it revealed something devastating. There was a child connected to that relationship. A child Meghan allegedly never told Harry about. A child whose DNA matched someone the world would never have expected. A secret son. Let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about a prince. Someone who has been fighting to define his own identity for years. Someone who lost his mother young. Someone who spent his entire life in the shadow of cameras and headlines. Someone who finally thought he found peace, only to have it shattered by a truth buried in someone else's past. And here's where the stakes rose even higher. The results didn't just confirm the existence of this child. They hinted at something even more complicated, something even more painful, something that would send Harry into an emotional tailspin he had never faced before. Because the test suggested something no one could have predicted. Not the press, not the public, not even Harry himself. And that detail, that final twist, was the moment Harry went from confused to furious. Some say this was the breaking point. Some say this was the end of trust. Some say this was the moment Harry realized his reality was built on sand. But what triggered the DNA test? Who sent the message? Why did Meghan hide the truth? And what did Harry do after reading the last line of that report? Because that line, that single line, was the spark that ignited everything that followed. But what happened next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. He didn't recognize his own voice when it happened. That's how one staff member described it. The moment Prince Harry slammed his fist onto the mahogany desk so hard the picture frames rattled. Not a loud scream. Not a furious roar. Just a sudden, violent sound of flesh against polished wood, followed by a silence that felt heavier than any argument. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a person reach the very edge of their emotional capacity, the second just before they break? Not the meltdown, not the explosion, but the exact moment when they realize something in their life has crossed a line that can never be crossed back? That's where Harry was. And here's the irony. It wasn't the DNA results themselves, not yet. It was everything that led up to that moment. The tension in the cottage had been building for weeks. Harry's team noticed it first. The pacing, the distracted expression, the short replies, the way he stared at his phone like it held the answer to a question he was too afraid to say out loud. Harry wasn't sleeping. His eyes were bloodshot. He pulled at his hair. He muttered to himself when he thought no one was around. His workouts became harsher and longer, like he was trying to outrun something he couldn't admit. And Meghan? She kept insisting everything was fine. Too fine. That was the red flag. Because the truth is, Meghan usually had no problem expressing stress. You've seen her in interviews, right? She's articulate. She's emotional. She leans into vulnerability. So when she suddenly started acting like everything was smooth, seamless, perfect, Harry knew something was being hidden under that polished calm. Perfect is always suspicious. Perfect means controlled. Perfect means curated. Perfect means someone is hiding the cracks. And the cracks were spreading fast. The first sign happened on a Wednesday afternoon. Harry was sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through old photos of his mom. a habit he turned to whenever he felt something deep shifting inside him. Meghan walked in, noticed his mood, and instead of asking what was wrong, she froze. Her face changed, just for a second, but Harry caught it. You ever notice how the truth doesn't always come in words? Sometimes it slips out through a flinch, a hesitated breath, a sudden stiffness in the shoulders. Meghan's body language gave away something she never intended Harry to see: fear. Harry didn't push. Not yet. But something inside him tightened. The second sign came the next night. Harry heard Meghan speaking on the phone in their bedroom, voice hushed, tone sharp. When he walked in, she hung up instantly. Too quickly. Like she didn't want the person on the other end hearing him, but more importantly, like she didn't want Harry hearing them. She forced a smile, said it was just someone from her past, someone unimportant, someone she hadn't talked to in years. But Harry knew better. He had been trained his entire life to read people, to sense lies, to catch micro-expressions. And that night, he caught one. A flicker in her eyes, a tremble in her fingers, a swallow too deep, too forced. Fear again. The third sign was the one he couldn't ignore. A letter, hand-delivered. No return address, no sender name, just one line on the envelope. For Harry, inside, not a message, not a threat, not even handwriting. It was a sealed document, a lab header, a barcode, a date, and one word highlighted in red: DNA. Harry stared at it for 2 whole minutes, confused. Then he asked Meghan about it, and that was when everything began to spiral. Because Meghan didn't ask to see the envelope. She didn't ask what it said. She didn't ask who sent it. She just froze, then told him not to open it. That was the moment Harry felt the first real crack in his trust. Let me ask you this. If someone sent your partner a mysterious DNA report, wouldn't your first instinct be curiosity? A simple "let me see it." Oh, what is this? Wouldn't you want to clear the confusion immediately? But Meghan didn't want clarity. She wanted the envelope gone. She grabbed it. Harry snatched it back. She said, "It's a mistake." Harry said, "About what?" She said, "It's not what you think." Harry asked, "Then what is it?" That's when her voice cracked. Not in anger, in panic. Harry knew that sound. It wasn't guilt, or shame, or innocence. It was fear of exposure. So he kept the envelope. And Meghan stormed out of the room, leaving Harry alone with the one thing she desperately didn't want him to see. That's when the meltdown began. Not the final explosion. We're not there yet. This was the early stage. The moment the wall Harry thought he could lean on shifted underneath him. For hours, Harry paced the house. He didn't open the envelope. He couldn't. He walked from room to room, shaking his head, muttering under his breath, trying to piece together every inconsistency Meghan had ever shared about her past. Because here's the truth. Harry never judged Meghan for her history. He wasn't the controlling type. He didn't demand a list of every person she'd ever known. But he expected honesty. He expected transparency. He expected trust. Instead, what he got was a version of Meghan's past that suddenly felt edited. So he sat at the dining table, the envelope in front of him, the world he thought he understood behind him, and a suspicion he didn't want to feel whispering inside his chest. Was Meghan hiding something? And if she was, why did it involve DNA? Whose DNA? Hers? Someone else's? A child's? That last question hit him hardest. Because Harry understood children. He understood what it meant to grow up with secrets hanging over your head. He understood what it meant to lose innocence too early. He understood what it meant when adults hid the truth. Harry despised secrets. And now he was staring at one. He didn't open the envelope that day. He needed time. He needed answers from Meghan first. And when he tried asking her again the next morning, Meghan did something that terrified him more than the envelope itself. She lied. Not a small lie. Not a deflection. A direct fabrication. She claimed the envelope had nothing to do with her. That it was a fan prank. That it was sent to cause chaos. But Harry wasn't stupid. The envelope was hand-delivered. It had authentic lab formatting. It was addressed to him personally. A fan didn't send that. Someone with intent did. Someone who knew something. Someone connected to Meghan. Someone she didn't want Harry to hear from. That afternoon, something inside Harry snapped. Not violently. Quietly. Privately. But devastatingly. He locked himself in his office. Closed the curtains. Shut off his phone. He stared at the envelope for nearly 40 minutes. Hands shaking. Heart pounding. Because deep down, he feared this wasn't just about Meghan's past. He feared it was about something much bigger. Something life-changing. Something irreversible. And then, for the first time in days, Harry felt anger. Not at the envelope. Not at whoever sent it. At Meghan. At the lies. The evasions. The panic. The way she grabbed the envelope like it was explosive. The way she pretended nothing was wrong. Harry slammed his fist on the desk. The sound echoed through the house. Staff froze in the hallway. Everyone knew something had snapped. Because Harry had reached his breaking point. He opened the envelope. He unfolded the first page. He saw the name at the top, and his heart stopped. But it wasn't the name that paralyzed him. It was what, or rather, who, the DNA was connected to. And that revelation didn't just change Harry's understanding of Meghan. It shattered it. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Not the gentle vibration of a text. Not the soft chime of an email. A full volume, jarring ringtone that sliced through the silence of the house like a knife. Harry jolted awake. At first, he thought it was an emergency alert or a security call. That's how deeply conditioned he was. Years of military training, years of being on standby for royal protocol, years of expecting the unexpected. But it wasn't the palace. It wasn't the police. It wasn't his brother. It wasn't even the usual restricted government line. It was a block number. And that was the first sign that something was off. Tell me this. If your phone rang in the dead of night from an unknown caller, would you answer? Most people wouldn't. But Harry did. Because something inside him, something raw and unsettled from the DNA envelope he had opened earlier, told him the call wasn't random. He answered with a simple, quiet, "Hello." Silence. A heavy, breathing silence that stretched for just enough seconds to make Harry sit upright in bed. "Who is this?" Harry asked. More silence. Then the voice came. A man's voice. Calm. Measured. Strangely familiar. Like someone Harry had never met, but had heard before. A tone with history woven into it. The voice said only one thing. "You need to test the child." Harry froze. Not physically. Physically he was still breathing, still sitting, still staring at the dark ceiling of his room. But mentally, everything inside him stopped. "What did you just say?" he asked. The voice exhaled, slow and deliberate. "You heard me." Harry's fingers tightened around the phone. "What child? Who is this?" But the voice ignored his question and said something that made Harry's blood run cold. "She didn't tell you, did she?" Harry felt heat rising in his chest. His jaw clenched. His pulse quickened. "Tell me what," he demanded. The voice paused, then lowered itself into a deep, pained whisper. "She'll never tell you. She never planned to." Harry shot out of bed. He turned on the lamp. The entire room was now bright, but the brightest thing was the fear beginning to bloom inside him. "Who are you talking about?" he snapped. "You know who," the voice said. "Meghan." Harry felt the floor tilt beneath him. You ever receive information that your brain rejects instantly because accepting it would destroy the foundation you're standing on? That was Harry. He shook his head. "This is insane," he muttered. "This is some deranged troll. I'm hanging up." But right before he could disconnect, the voice delivered the blow that pinned Harry in place. "Ask her about his birth. Ask her about the dates. Ask her about where she really was. And ask her why she has kept him hidden." Harry didn't hang up. He didn't even breathe. He just whispered, "What are you talking about?" The voice softened to something strangely emotional. "She loved me, Harry. And the child, he matters. He deserves to know the truth." That sentence shattered Harry's entire sense of reality. Loved me. Loved. Past tense. A declaration wrapped in regret and possession. Harry's chest tightened. "You're lying," he said, voice trembling. "No," the voice replied. "I'm finally telling the truth." Harry's fingers were shaking so violently, he almost dropped the phone. The room suddenly felt too warm, too tight, too small to hold his thoughts. "Why are you calling me?" Harry demanded. "Why not her?" The voice let out a bitter laugh. "She blocked me years ago. She disappeared. Changed her life. Changed her story. Acted like nothing ever happened." Harry's throat was dry. "She moved on," Harry said. "No. She erased." Harry felt something inside him twist painfully, like a string being pulled too tight. "Listen to me," the voice continued. "I don't want anything from you. Not money. Not attention. Not trouble. I just want that child to have clarity. Before it's too late." Harry's eyebrows narrowed. Too late for what? The voice hesitated, The first time it showed any crack. Do the test. Run it again. Confirm it yourself. Then confront her with the truth she's been hiding. Harry was silent. And Harry, the voice added. Harry lifted the phone back to his ear. If you don't do this now, it will destroy you later. A cold sweat ran down Harry's back. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Because, the voice said, a child deserves to know his father. Harry's eyes widened. You're saying I? The voice cut him off. The tone changed, solemn, resigned, final. Ask her about Argentina. Harry's heart dropped. What does Argentina have to do with? But the voice didn't answer. Because the line went dead. Just like that. A single beep. A sudden silence. A call that disappeared like smoke in the air. Harry stared at the phone screen. Blocked number. No trace. No message. No name. Just a voice that felt too close to Meghan's past to dismiss, and too heavy with truth to ignore. He sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, the phone dangling loosely from his fingers. The room felt different now, colder, darker, heavier. Everything inside him began unraveling. Because now he had 3 urgent questions burning in his mind. Who was that man? What happened in Argentina? And why did Meghan never mention a child? But the most terrifying question, the one Harry couldn't shake, was this. Why did the child involve him? His hands began shaking again. You ever feel reality shifting beneath your feet, like you can't trust anything you thought you knew? That's where Harry was. Trapped between loyalty and suspicion, between love and truth, between identity and betrayal. He tried calling back. The number was unreachable. He tried searching his messages. Nothing new. He checked the window. Empty driveway. He checked the street. Silent and still. Whoever the caller was, they had planned every detail. They wanted Harry to know. They wanted him to question. They wanted him to investigate. And now he couldn't pretend nothing had happened. Not after that call. Not after the envelope. Not after the panic in Meghan's voice earlier. Harry sank into the nearest chair, elbows on knees, head in hands. Everything had changed. And the worst part? He had the sickening feeling that Meghan knew exactly who the caller was. Because while Harry was sitting in the dark, replaying the call over and over, Meghan was downstairs. Wide awake, phone in hand, calling someone. Frantic, desperate, saying one trembling line Harry wasn't supposed to hear as he quietly stepped toward the staircase. He called him. He actually called him. What are we going to do now? Harry stopped breathing. We. Not I. Not he. We. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Here's the part no one ever talks about. Before the palaces, before the podcasts, before the royal titles and the global spotlight, before the fairy tale narrative polished for public consumption, Meghan Markle had a life. A complicated life. A layered life. A life that didn't vanish just because she stepped into Buckingham Palace for the first time holding Harry's hand. And that life, the one she so expertly separated from her royal identity, was now coming back with a vengeance. In the hours after the mysterious phone call, Harry was no longer confused. He was suspicious. He was alert. He was finally paying attention to the details he once brushed aside, the vague answers, the incomplete stories, the sudden tone shifts when certain topics came up. And Meghan's past? Suddenly, it didn't feel like a collection of unrelated memories. It felt like a puzzle. A puzzle with missing pieces. Pieces someone else was now trying to force into the picture. Because the man on the phone didn't drop random claims. He dropped specifics. A timeline. A location. A child. A secret connection. Argentina. Harry had heard that word before. But not from a stranger. From Meghan herself. And that's where this chapter truly begins. The moment Harry starts rewinding the past. Let me ask you this. Have you ever looked back at an old conversation and suddenly realized it meant something entirely different from what you thought at the time? Words that once felt harmless now carry a second meaning? A hidden meaning you only see after someone connects the dots for you? That's exactly what happened to Harry. Because Meghan had told him stories about Argentina, but not enough. Just fragments. Sliced memories without context. A work trip. A personal retreat. A time I needed to rediscover myself. But never a name. Never a place. Never a companion. And now, after the phone call, those fragments felt coordinated. Chosen. Censored. Harry remembered the first time she even mentioned Argentina. They were still dating then, long before engagement, sitting in a small restaurant in Toronto. She mentioned she once took time off to travel alone, that she needed distance from everything, that she wanted to find clarity. Harry thought nothing of it. After all, who hasn't taken a trip to clear their head? But here's the twist. Years later, Harry would learn Meghan didn't travel alone. Not even close. And that revelation is where the cracks in the timeline began to show. Harry spent the day after the call replaying every conversation they'd ever had about her past. He wrote down notes. He listed dates. He compared stories he'd heard from Meghan with stories he heard from her old acquaintances. For the first time, he was questioning things he once accepted blindly, because trust makes you blind. Love makes you overlook things. And fear? Fear makes you believe the best version of a person, even when the truth is much darker. So let's walk through what Harry uncovered, slowly, carefully, the way he pieced it together. Because Meghan didn't hide her entire past. She hid one part of it, one person from it, someone Harry had never heard about, someone Meghan pretended didn't exist, someone the phone call connected directly to the DNA envelope, a man she'd met years before she met Harry, a man she was reportedly inseparable from, a man who disappeared from her public narrative the moment she married into royalty. Friends from her past described him with different words. Her shadow, her anchor, her weakness, her unfinished chapter, a love story she never closed, only buried. That's the part Harry didn't know. Not because he didn't ask, he did. Not because he expected too little, he didn't. But because Meghan was very skilled at redirecting him away from certain topics with charm, emotional appeals, or claims of trauma she didn't want to relive. Harry respected that. He respected her boundaries. He respected her past. He didn't realize she was curating it. What Meghan didn't expect was that the past she buried would return in the form of a phone call at 2:17 a.m. A voice she thought would stay silent forever. And that's when Harry started digging. Because the caller mentioned something else. Something that struck Harry like lightning. She erased me. That single sentence pulled on a thread Harry didn't even realize was loose. Because erasing someone isn't the same as losing contact. Or drifting apart. Or ending things. Erasing means deliberate removal. Erasing means intentional omission. Erasing means rewriting history. And Harry realized Meghan's stories of Argentina were missing context, emotional context. She talked about landscapes, food, self-discovery, the warmth of the culture, but never the people she met. Never the one person who mattered most. And here's where the contradiction appeared, a contradiction Harry didn't see until now. Meghan said the trip was only 3 weeks. But travel records showed she stayed over 2 months. 2 months unaccounted for. 2 months she never explained. 2 months full of holes Harry had never filled because he never suspected he needed to. But now those holes looked like hiding places. Places where the truth was kept locked away. Harry wanted to talk to her. He needed to. But every time he tried, Meghan was different. She was tense, defensive, distracted, avoidant. She kept checking her phone. She jumped whenever it buzzed. She refused to say who she was messaging. She refused to explain why she was suddenly restless. Harry noticed everything now, especially how she reacted when he mentioned the DNA envelope again. Her voice went flat. Her shoulders stiffened. She said, "Can we drop this? It's handled." Handled. As if the envelope, the lab results, the caller, the accusation, were nothing more than a parking ticket. And that's when Harry began to see a different side of Meghan. Not the warm, emotional, outspoken woman he fell in love with. Not the compassionate advocate. Not the polished public figure. This Meghan was cold, strategic, immediately calculating risk. And that terrified him. Because Harry wasn't just dealing with a hidden chapter. He was dealing with someone actively trying to keep it hidden. So he pushed harder. "What happened in Argentina?" he asked her. Meghan's reaction was instantaneous. Her back straightened. Her eyes narrowed. Her breath caught. "Who told you that?" she demanded. That question alone was an admission. Not, "What do you mean?" Not, "Why are you asking?" Not, "What are you referring to?" Her first question was, "Who told you?" Harry felt his stomach drop. "No one told me," he lied. "I remembered you mentioned it once." Meghan shook her head. She wasn't convinced. Her voice grew sharp. "Argentina has nothing to do with this. Stop searching for connections that don't exist." But connections were all Harry was finding. He pressed again. "Were you alone?" Meghan hesitated. A single second, but it was enough. Enough to reveal she was weighing her answer. Choosing it. Editing it. Yes, she finally said. I traveled alone. Harry knew she was lying. He didn't call her out. Not yet. Instead, he asked softly, did you meet anyone while you were there? Meghan's jaw tightened. She answered too quickly this time. No. Another lie. Harry didn't need a DNA test to confirm guilt. He could see it in her expression. Fear. Resistance. Deflection. Why are you asking me these things? She snapped. Harry spoke calmly, even though inside he was spinning. Because someone called me last night. Meghan froze. That freeze, that exact moment, confirmed everything. Her pupils widened. Her lips parted slightly. Her breath hitched. And the fear in her eyes? It wasn't fear for Harry. It was fear of Harry knowing. Who called you? She whispered. A man, Harry said, watching her face carefully. Someone who said you knew him. Meghan stared at him long enough to break the air in the room. Then she said something that didn't just add suspicion, it detonated it. What did he say? She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was asking out of panic. Harry answered slowly, analyzing every shift in her expression. He told me to look into the child. Meghan's mouth quivered. For the first time since this started, she didn't look angry. She looked terrified. Harry, she whispered, you cannot trust anything he says. Who is he? Harry asked. Meghan shook her head. He's lying. He's dangerous. He's obsessed. That word again. Obsessed. Used conveniently as a shield. Who is he? Harry repeated. Meghan paused. Then she finally said it. The first truthful line Harry had heard all morning. He was someone from my past. But Harry needed more. So he asked the question that would define the rest of their conversation. Was he the father? For a split second, one tiny, fragile moment, Meghan didn't breathe. Her face didn't move. Her eyes didn't blink. Her lips didn't part. It was an honest silence. A guilty silence. A silence that told Harry she was not just hiding a man. She was hiding something infinitely bigger. Because Meghan knew something Harry didn't. A truth she couldn't outrun anymore. A truth connected not only to the man, but to a child. A child Harry knew nothing about. A child someone wanted him to test. A child whose DNA was already in his hands. But what Harry discovered next would shatter the illusion of Meghan's past completely, and no one saw it coming that he wasn't supposed to exist in Meghan's story anymore. That's the part that stunned Harry the most. The sheer effort that had gone into removing this man from every version of Meghan's past he had ever heard. Not minimized, not reframed, erased. But the universe has a cruel way of returning people we try hardest to forget. And for Meghan, that person was him. The man Harry had never seen, never heard of, never been warned about. Yet somehow, he had been closer to Meghan than Harry ever realized. This wasn't some casual fling, not some passing acquaintance, not some blurry figure from a chapter she'd outgrown. No, he was someone who mattered. Someone she had once been deeply connected to. Someone she wasn't willing to talk about, ever. Someone intimate enough to know the one thing Meghan had hidden most effectively. A child. But before the DNA, before the phone call, before the late-night panic between Meghan and whoever she was secretly contacting, there had been a love story. A love Harry never knew about. And that love is where things begin. Harry sat alone in the office after confronting Meghan earlier, his mind replaying every detail she'd tried to gloss over, every story that didn't add up, every hesitation he dismissed as trauma, stress, or exhaustion. But now he saw those hesitations differently. He saw them as warnings. Warnings he didn't understand at the time. Warnings he didn't think to question because he trusted her. Warnings that came wrapped in emotional pleas, carefully curated vulnerability, and charm that redirected him away from the truth. Because that's who Meghan was before him. Guarded, controlled, private, and painfully selective about who she allowed close enough to know the real her. And this man had known the real her. Not the version the world saw after she stepped into royal life. Not the public figure, the Duchess, the advocate, the symbol of reinvention. He knew the version of Meghan who existed before the cameras. The Meghan who still had unhealed scars. The Meghan who still carried old emotional shadows. The Meghan who hadn't yet become a global brand. Harry remembered the exact moment the caller's voice shifted, that tone of ownership wrapped in regret. She loved me. Those 3 words kept echoing in Harry's skull like a drumbeat. Not, we were together. Not, we dated. Not, we were close. She loved me. Loved. Past tense. Not forgotten. Not dismissed. Love stamped into memory. Harry didn't want to believe it. But the more he examined Meghan's past, the past she'd trimmed down, polished, and selectively shared, the more the loose threads began to reveal something more tangled beneath the surface. So Harry did something he had never done before. He dug into her pre-royal life. The real version. Not the curated one Meghan presented. Not the version he learned from interviews or tabloids. Not the version she told him over candlelit dinners or walks under California sunsets. He searched for the woman she didn't talk about. The woman she used to be. The deeper he went, the more obvious it became. Meghan had spent years with this man. Not months. Years. Their lives were intertwined. Their pictures, now scrubbed from social media, once existed. Friends remembered him clearly. Coworkers remembered him. People at her old yoga studio remembered him. A photographer recalled taking candid shots of them at a small cafe, hands intertwined, laughing like two people who had built a world of their own. That was before Meghan married Trevor. Before Meghan became a Hollywood actress. Before Meghan became a Duchess. He was part of the version of her life she didn't want anyone digging into. The version she left behind. But Harry didn't know that until now. It all started with one piece of information, something that didn't seem important at first. A friend from Meghan's old social circle once mentioned in passing that Meghan had lived with someone briefly before moving to Toronto for Suits. Meghan had brushed it off when Harry asked casually about it. She said it was nothing serious. But now that detail glowed like a beacon. Because the caller said something else, something Harry couldn't stop replaying. She disappeared. She cut me off. She erased everything. People don't erase casual flings. They erase painful attachments. They erase pasts they don't want following them. They erase people who know too much. Harry pulled up everything he could find. Old interviews, archived photos, digital traces Meghan thought were deleted but still existed in forgotten corners of the internet. Each detail painted a clearer picture. Meghan hadn't erased him because he didn't matter. She erased him because he mattered too much. Let's go back for a moment. Years before Meghan met Harry, she was going through a difficult period, emotional burnout, a crumbling relationship, frustration with her career, and pressure to reinvent herself. She took a retreat, a break, a journey to find herself. That retreat wasn't a solo trip. It wasn't a quiet reflection period. It wasn't a moment of self-discovery alone. It was the beginning of the secret relationship. According to people who knew them back then, Meghan met him through mutual friends at a charity event. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't high status. But he understood her. He was the person she cried to during her divorce. The person she leaned on when work fell apart. The person she traveled with, including to Argentina. The person who made her feel grounded when her career was rocky. The person she confided in about childhood pain she never told Harry about. And that kind of emotional intimacy is deeper than romance. It's binding. And that's what scared Harry most. The idea that Meghan had once belonged to another life so fully she couldn't detach from it cleanly. The man wasn't after money. He wasn't after attention. He didn't want fame. He wasn't exploiting her success. No, he wanted acknowledgement, truth, closure, answers, and, according to him, fairness for a child. And that part is where everything sharpens. Because friends from that era said Meghan and the man were inseparable for one reason. They were planning a future together. They weren't a casual couple. They talked about moving. They talked about raising a family. They talked about things Meghan never mentioned to Harry. Then one day, she left. Coldly. Suddenly. Without explanation. At least, not one the man found acceptable. She had gotten a new opportunity. She had met new people. She had opened new doors. And she walked away from him as if the relationship never existed. But the secret didn't end there. A few months after Meghan's disappearance from his life, a child appeared. A child with a timeline that matched perfectly with the period Meghan didn't discuss. A child whose father was unclear. A child whose existence left a trail of questions no one answered. A child the man believed was connected to him and Meghan. A child he had once begged Meghan to acknowledge. A child she refused to discuss. Harry learned this from a source who once knew the man. Someone who had seen Meghan with him before Argentina. Someone who remembered the panic that erupted when Meghan discovered she was pregnant. Not because of the pregnancy itself, but because of what it meant for her career, her future, her reinvention. This wasn't a rumor. It was a recollection, a confession from someone who had nothing to gain by telling Harry the truth. The timeline pointed to something undeniable. Meghan's secret love wasn't just a past relationship. It was a defining chapter she buried to survive. But the man never buried it. Because of the child. And when Meghan refused to give him answers, refused to confirm paternity, refused to discuss options, refused to admit the truth, the relationship imploded. Violently. Emotionally. Beyond repair. That was the end of them. The erasure the caller had spoken of. Meghan wasn't just running from a person. She was running from consequences. From responsibility. From exposure. Harry closed his eyes as the reality set in. For years, Meghan had been terrified not of her past, but of it resurfacing. This wasn't about an old boyfriend showing up. This wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about insecurity. It was about a secret she hoped would remain buried until the end of time. But here's the twist that hit Harry hardest. Why had the man contacted him instead of her? Why not confront Meghan directly? Why not demand answers from her? Why involve Harry at all? Unless the man believed the child wasn't his. Unless the man believed the child was connected to Harry. Unless the man believed the one thing Meghan feared most. That the child wasn't from her past, but from Harry's. Impossible? Yes. Unbelievable? Absolutely. But genetically, there were reasons to question the truth. Reasons Meghan had never explained. Reasons she had never discussed. Reasons she had buried deeply enough she thought no one would ever dig them up. And now Harry wasn't just questioning the relationship. He was questioning the timeline. The pregnancy. The disappearance. The silence. The panic. The DNA envelope. Because the deeper he dug, the closer he came to a truth Meghan never wanted him, or the world, to know. A truth connected not just to her past, but to a child who was already old enough to speak for himself. And that child, he was about to reveal something that would change everything. But what Harry discovered next would turn suspicion into certainty, and no one saw it coming. The first clue wasn't a confession. It wasn't a message. It wasn't even something Meghan said. It was a box. A simple cardboard box that had no business existing. Not in their home, not in Meghan's life, not in Harry's reality. A box that shouldn't have been there. A box Harry wasn't meant to find. And inside that box, everything changed. Let's rewind to how it happened. After the explosive confrontation about Argentina, Meghan stormed out of the room, furious, humiliated, terrified to her core. You could practically feel the energy shift in the house. The silence became dangerous, the air heavier, the tension electric. Harry stayed behind. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He wasn't shouting. Not yet. He wasn't accusing. Not yet. But he was thinking, and that was worse. Because when Harry's brain is quiet, that's when he's most dangerous. That's when he starts connecting dots. That's when he follows instinct. That's when he stops believing convenient answers. And after everything that happened, the envelope, the phone call, the lies, the panic, his instincts were screaming that he had missed something big, something physical, something tangible, something Meghan kept close enough to monitor, but hidden far enough to protect. So he started searching, not snooping, not invading privacy, searching, because Harry wasn't looking for gossip. He was looking for the truth. And the truth was sitting in the basement. A small, forgotten storage room Meghan never mentioned. A room she always said she'd organize later. A room she locked with a key she kept on her personal keychain. Most people wouldn't care about a locked storage room. Harry didn't either, until that night. Because fear does something interesting to memory. It makes old details suddenly feel important. It makes small things look suspicious. It makes forgotten moments look like warnings. And Meghan's obsessive need to keep that storage door closed suddenly felt like a clue. So Harry went downstairs. The hallway was dim. The air was cool. The quiet was suffocating. He walked toward the door at the end of the hallway, the one with the "Do Not Enter" sign Meghan had placed jokingly months ago. A sign Harry now realized wasn't a joke at all. He tried the handle. Locked. He stood there for a full minute, inhaling, exhaling, trying to convince himself he wasn't about to cross a line. But then he remembered Meghan's face earlier. The panic, the lies, the urgency to protect a secret he didn't even understand. Harry took out the key ring he'd swiped from Meghan's purse earlier, the one he never thought he'd use. One by one, he tried every key. Fourth key, click. The door opened. Inside, dust particles floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Rows of plastic bins lined the shelves. Old clothes, books, magazines, scripts, photos, props from her acting career. Nothing suspicious. Until he saw it. A box on the top shelf. Plain brown cardboard. No labels. No markings. Perfectly sealed. The only box that looked intentionally plain. Harry pulled it down. Dust sprinkled onto his arms. The weight was off. Too light for personal papers. Too heavy for clothes. He set it on the floor and opened it. The first thing he saw was a baby blanket. Yellow. Soft. Worn around the edges. Harry froze. This wasn't baby stuff from Archie or Lilibet. This was older. Different fabric. Different style. Different age. He lifted the blanket and found something else. A tiny blue onesie. Not new. Not recent. Old enough that Meghan should have mentioned it years ago. Under the onesie was a photograph. A baby. Small, round face, dark hair, deep brown eyes, wrapped in the same yellow blanket. Harry stared at it. Longer than he meant to. Longer than he understood. Long enough for his heart to begin pounding. Because the child had Meghan's smile. The arch of her eyebrows. The shape of her nose. This wasn't a cousin. This wasn't a godchild. This wasn't a random baby picture. This child was connected to Meghan. Deeply. And Meghan had hidden the evidence. Harry felt the room spin. He put the photo down carefully, hands shaking as he reached further into the box. A hospital band. A faded wristband with a date written on it. A date that hit Harry like a punch to the chest. Because the year on the wristband overlapped perfectly with Meghan's Argentina trip. The very trip she had refused to discuss. Harry whispered the date under his breath. And as soon as he said it out loud, everything inside him collapsed. She had been pregnant. During Argentina. During the time she disappeared from her old life. During the period she later described vaguely as personal growth. But there was more. Buried at the bottom of the box was a folded piece of paper. Aging, creased, but undeniably significant. Harry opened it. It was a clinic form. A foreign clinic. The name of the facility was Spanish. The location? Buenos Aires. Argentina. There it was. Black and white. Impossible to deny. Impossible to explain away. A pregnancy confirmation form. Harry felt the air leave his lungs. He wasn't just dealing with a secret relationship anymore. He was dealing with a secret pregnancy. A secret birth. A secret child. Every lie Meghan told suddenly made sense. Every panic reaction. Every hesitation. Every attempt to shut down conversation about her past. She wasn't hiding a romance. She was hiding motherhood. Harry sank onto the floor, box open beside him, evidence scattered, his pulse racing like a runaway engine. His mind replayed the phone call. The envelope. The man's voice trembling when he said, "She never told you." No, she hadn't. And the betrayal wasn't just personal. It was foundational. Because Harry had built his life with Meghan on trust, on transparency, on shared values, on the idea that they were united against the world. But now he saw the truth clearly. Meghan had built her life with Harry on omissions. Selective truths. Rewritten memories. Edited history. Erased chapters. And one of those chapters was a baby. A real baby. One who had a birth record. One who had a photo. One who existed. But the biggest shock wasn't the existence of the child. It was what Harry found next. Under the clinic form was a torn page from what appeared to be a notebook. Handwritten, emotional, rushed. It wasn't Meghan's handwriting. It was his. The man. Harry read the first line. "Please don't do this. He deserves to know his father." Harry dropped the letter. His breath shook uncontrollably. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't speculation. This was real. A man had begged Meghan to acknowledge the child. A child born in Argentina. A child she hid from everyone. A child whose birth was never recorded in her public story. And that child, the one whose existence she denied, was part of the DNA envelope Harry had received. Harry picked up the photo again. He held it next to the onesie. Next to the clinic form. Next to the hospital wristband. A timeline emerged. A secret life. A hidden pregnancy. A baby born in another country. A man she once loved asking for answers she refused to give. Harry swallowed hard. His chest felt crushed under the weight of the truth. He suddenly understood why Meghan had panicked. Why she grabbed the envelope. Why she froze when he mentioned the call. Why she refused to speak about Argentina. Why she kept this box hidden in a room he never entered. She wasn't hiding shame. She was hiding a child. A child with her face. A child she never told Harry about. But why? Why deny a child exists? Why erase an entire chapter of motherhood? Why silence a man who once mattered to her? Why deny him clarity? Why hide evidence in a locked room? What was she afraid of? Harry felt the floor tilt beneath him again. There was only one explanation. One terrifying, unavoidable explanation. She wasn't afraid of the man knowing the truth. She was afraid of Harry knowing it. Afraid of what he would do. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid of what the DNA results would reveal. Because this wasn't just about Meghan's past. This was about the possibility that the child wasn't the caller's at all. Harry stared at the photo. He saw something he hadn't noticed before, the shape of the chin. A chin that did not belong to Meghan. A chin that did not match the collar. A chin that looked painfully familiar. Harry felt cold. The resemblance was subtle. Not obvious. Not undeniable. But enough to raise the most terrifying possibility of all. What if the child was connected to him? He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He couldn't move. Because if that were true, if the timelines overlapped, if the clinic form hinted at deception, if Meghan had hidden the truth to protect herself, then everything he thought he knew about their relationship was a lie. And the final clue, the one at the bottom of the box, confirmed that Meghan's secret past wasn't just a forgotten chapter. It was a ticking time bomb. Harry picked it up slowly. It was another photograph. Not of a baby. Of Meghan, holding an infant. In Argentina, wrapped in the same yellow blanket. Smiling softly. A smile Harry had never seen. A smile she never shared when talking about her past. A mother's smile. Harry dropped the photo as if it had burned him. He stumbled backward. He felt sick. He understood now. Everything. But what he didn't realize, not yet, was that this child wasn't the only secret lurking in Meghan's past. Because the truth was about to hit him harder than anything he had discovered so far. And what Harry uncovered next would shatter the last part of her story she thought she had under control, and no one saw it coming. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. Before the truth. After the truth. Before the lie. After the lie. Before the photo. After the photo. For Harry, this was one of those moments. Because there, in his hands, shaking so violently he could hardly keep the picture steady, was the single image Meghan never wanted him to see. Meghan, holding a baby, against the backdrop of a foreign hospital, wrapped in the same yellow blanket he'd just found in the box. And she was smiling. Not her Hollywood smile. Not her polished royal smile. Not the carefully curated smile she used in interviews. This one was different. Soft. Unfiltered. Private. A mother's smile. A smile that told a story she swore never happened. The room suddenly felt too bright, too tight, too loud even in its silence. Harry's pulse thundered in his ears. His heartbeat felt like it was vibrating through his bones. His entire body went numb. He stared at the photo for so long he forgot to blink. Because the truth wasn't just in the existence of the child. It was in the expression on Meghan's face. The kind of expression you can't fake. The kind you can't hide. The kind that comes only when you're holding your own flesh and blood. You ever seen a picture that destroys your version of reality in one breath? That was this. Everything Meghan had told him up until now, about her life, her identity, her dreams, her heartbreaks, felt suddenly incomplete. Like he had been living inside a version of her story she edited just for him. And the missing chapters were now scattered across the cold basement floor. Harry pressed the photo closer, searching for clues. The walls were white. The lighting dim but medical. The floor tiled. The signage on the wall behind her. Spanish. Argentina. Again. Always Argentina. Harry saw a nurse in the background. A name tag, barely visible. A logo on her uniform sleeve. A sun symbol with an acronym beneath it. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a misinterpretation of her past. This was proof. Meghan had given birth in Argentina. A secret pregnancy. A secret birth. A secret child. And she never told him. Not a hint. Not a confession. Not a moment of vulnerability. Nothing. Why? Harry whispered to no one, voice cracking. Why hide this? Why bury something this monumental? Why carry the weight of motherhood alone? Why erase the man? Why erase the child? Why erase herself? Harry closed his eyes, gripping the photo so tightly the edges bent. He didn't want to see the obvious. He didn't want to admit the truth. He didn't want to believe the possibility now screaming at him. But he couldn't unsee the resemblance. Let's talk about that. Because the baby in the photo wasn't some random infant. The child didn't just look like Meghan. There were subtle details Harry couldn't ignore. A slightly curved chin, just like his. A wide forehead, unmistakably similar. A faint red tint to the infant's hair, the same trait that had followed him since childhood. Eyes large and deep-set, eerily like Diana's. Harry shook his head violently. No, this can't be. But the more he tried to push the thought away, the harder it clamped down. It wasn't impossible. It wasn't biologically absurd. The timelines aligned in a way that was devastatingly precise. Harry remembered traveling during the same period Meghan had vanished into Argentina. He had been in an unstable, emotional phase back then, a period he rarely talked about. The years before meeting Meghan were messy, confusing, chaotic. There were events he barely remembered, nights blurred by grief and identity crisis, charities, parties, trips he attended on autopilot. And one charity event, years ago, included a delegation from South America, a delegation that included a certain actress he now recognized all too well. What if that wasn't their first meeting? What if Meghan lied about more than just Argentina? Harry swallowed hard. His throat burned. He wasn't ready to accept any of this. But the image in his hand wasn't giving him a choice. He sat there for minutes, replaying everything. Meghan's panic, the man's phone call, the DNA envelope, the hidden pregnancy form, the baby items in the box, the letter begging Meghan to acknowledge fatherhood. And now this photo. Every piece fit too perfectly. Every detail pointed in one direction. But Harry wasn't ready to follow the path completely. Not yet. Not until he found out for himself. So he flipped the photo over. And that was the moment his breath left his body. Because on the back of the photo, written lightly in black ink, were two things. A date and a name. The date matched the clinic wristband. But the name wasn't the caller's. It wasn't Meghan's. It wasn't a family member's. It was a first name Harry had never seen before. But one detail made his entire body turn to ice. The child's surname was written as Mountbatten Windsor. Harry dropped the photo. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. His vision blurred. His chest tightened. His fingers clawed at the carpet as if trying to anchor himself back in reality. Because if that name was real, if Meghan had written it, if the child was registered under that surname, even privately, then Harry was not just connected to this child emotionally. He was connected by blood. Harry forced himself to pick the photo up again. He stared at the backside, reading the name over and over, hoping it would change, hoping he was hallucinating, hoping this was some twisted misunderstanding. But ink doesn't lie. And the date, the damning date, placed Meghan in Argentina on the exact day the child was born. Everything inside Harry collapsed. He suddenly understood why Meghan hid the truth. Why she erased the man. Why she panicked when the DNA envelope arrived. Why she shut down the moment Argentina was mentioned. Why she hid the photo in a room he never entered. Because the man who called him, the man begging to know the truth, the man claiming Meghan erased him. He might not have been the father. He might have suspected something Meghan never admitted. And now Harry saw it clearly. Meghan never erased the man to protect herself. She erased him to protect Harry. To protect the truth that the past was far more complicated than she ever admitted. To protect the possibility that the child wasn't the caller's. To protect the possibility that the child wasn't a secret from her past, but a secret from his. Harry felt physically sick. His fingers trembled violently as he held the photo again. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. His eyes burned with a truth he was afraid to face. He whispered the name written on the back of the photo. And then he whispered the date. And then he whispered, "Was I the father?" The room seemed to tilt. His pulse echoed through his skull. The edges of his vision darkened. Because if Meghan had hidden the existence of a child from him, if she had erased the father to protect her story, if she had rewritten their timeline, if she had destroyed evidence of their first meeting, if she had manipulated the narrative of how they fell in love, then their entire relationship, their entire marriage, was built on a foundation of lies. Harry buried his face in his hands. This wasn't betrayal. This wasn't dishonesty. This wasn't manipulation. This was annihilation. He had to know the truth. Immediately. Completely. Without Meghan. And there was only one place to find that truth. The DNA envelope. Harry grabbed the envelope from his desk, hands trembling, breathing shallow, heart thundering. He tore open the second page, the one he hadn't read yet, the one he'd avoided because he wasn't ready for answers. And the moment he saw the first line, his world cracked open.